The day we buried Grandma Cora, my parents changed the locks on the house I had called home for most of my life. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't ask where I would go. They simply packed my belongings, placed my bags on the front porch, and drove away like I was a stranger standing outside a place filled with my own memories. What they didn't know was that 3 days before Grandma Cora took her final breath, she placed a small cold metal key into my hand and looked at me with the calmest expression I had ever seen. Her voice was weak, but her words were clear. "Everything I have is yours. They just don't know it yet." At that moment, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought maybe she was talking about something sentimental, maybe a piece of jewelry or one of the old family keepsakes she always treasured. I had no idea that Grandma Cora had been quietly protecting me in a way nobody could see. Before I share what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach and hearing from people around the world. And if you enjoy stories about family, betrayal, and unexpected twists, make sure you stay connected because this one changes everything. My name is Reeve. I was 26 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio, and for most of my life, my family looked like a normal middle-class family from the outside. My parents, Dale and Marlene, worked hard, paid their bills, and cared deeply about appearances. But inside our home, things were different. The one person who always made me feel understood was Grandma Cora. She was the heart of our family. Every weekend as a child, I would visit her house, sit in her kitchen while she cooked, and listen to stories about her younger years. She taught me her recipes, showed me how to care for plants, and reminded me that kindness mattered more than pride. When she became sick during her final months, I was the one sitting beside her during hospital visits. I brought her favorite meals, helped organize her things, and stayed with her when the days became harder. Those moments with her became some of the most meaningful memories of my life. My parents noticed how close we were, but they never realized how much Grandma Cora trusted me. The morning of her funeral, I thought I was saying goodbye to the woman who had always been my safe place. I had no idea that before the day ended I would lose my family's trust, my home, and everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. But Grandma Cora had already seen it coming. For years I believed my family was simply going through a difficult phase. I kept telling myself that people change, stress affects relationships, and maybe things would eventually return to normal. But looking back, I can see that the distance between me and my parents didn't happen overnight. Dale and Marlene always had a picture of the life they wanted me to live. They had plans for my future, my career, and even the choices I should make. When I decided to follow a different path instead of the one they had chosen, something between us shifted. They never openly said they were disappointed, but I felt it in the small things. Conversations became shorter. Their interest in my life slowly disappeared. Family gatherings that once felt normal started happening without me. I would find out about dinners, plans, and decisions after everything was already arranged. I tried not to take it personally because Grandma Cora always reminded me that families go through seasons. She would hold my hand and tell me that keeping peace sometimes mattered more than proving who was right. I listened because she had lived longer than anyone I knew and I trusted her wisdom. But when Grandma Cora's health began to decline, I noticed another change. Dale and Marlene started acting like they were the only ones who had a say in everything. They organized conversations with doctors, made decisions about her daily routine, and created the impression that they were the ones carrying the responsibility. I didn't want to create more tension, especially while Grandma Cora was already dealing with so much. So I stayed quiet. I focused on spending time with her instead of arguing with my parents. The house where Grandma Cora lived was a simple place in a peaceful neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio. It wasn't a mansion or some luxury property. It was a small home filled with decades of memories. The kitchen where she cooked, the chair where she read every evening, and the rooms where our family gathered during better times. Everyone assumed that after Grandma Cora was gone, the house would naturally go to Dale. He was her son and nobody questioned that idea. My parents believed it. The relatives believed it. Even I thought that was probably what would happen. But there was one person who never saw it that way. Grandma Cora had spent her final months watching everything quietly. She noticed who showed up, who cared, and who only wanted control. And while everyone else was making assumptions about her future, Grandma Cora had already made her decision. 6 months before Grandma Cora passed away, something changed. Not in a way that anyone around her could immediately notice, but in small, careful steps that only made sense later. While everyone else was focused on her health, Grandma Cora was quietly putting things in order. She was never the type of person to make dramatic announcements or create unnecessary conflict. She believed actions spoke louder than arguments, and during those final months she followed that belief completely. She decided not to use the same family attorney Dale always trusted. Instead, she searched for someone independent, a woman named Sandra Off who worked downtown and had no connection to the family. Grandma Cora wanted someone who would only follow her instructions, not someone who would listen to family opinions. Over several meetings, Grandma Cora sat with Sandra and carefully reviewed everything she had built over the years. She talked about her home, her savings, her personal belongings, and the people she believed truly valued her. Every decision was made slowly and intentionally. She updated her legal documents, made sure everything was properly recorded, and prepared a handwritten letter explaining her choices. Grandma Cora knew there might be questions after she was gone, so she wanted every detail to be clear. But she kept all of this private. She never mentioned it to Dale. She never hinted anything to Marlene. She didn't want arguments during her final days, and she didn't want her remaining time surrounded by family conflict. The only person she started opening up to was me. At first, I didn't realize what she was doing. I thought she was simply becoming more sentimental. During my visits, she started giving me small pieces of her life. A necklace she had worn for years. An old bracelet from her younger days. Family photographs she wanted me to keep safe. Each item came with a memory attached. She would tell me the stories behind them, then smile and say things like, "Some things belong with the people who understand their value." I didn't think much of those words at the time. Then one quiet afternoon in late October while I was visiting her, Grandma Cora looked at me differently. She seemed tired but peaceful. She reached for something beside her and placed a small envelope in my hand. I remember looking at it, confused, wondering why she was giving me something so carefully sealed. She didn't explain everything right away. She only asked me to trust her. That moment felt ordinary on the surface, but later I realized it was the moment Grandma Cora had been preparing for months. She had already made the decisions that would change everything. I still remember the way Grandma Cora looked at me that afternoon. The room was quiet except for the soft sounds from the hospital hallway. She had always been the person who made difficult moments feel calm, and even then, when she was weaker than ever, she still had that same peaceful energy. I was sitting beside her bed, holding her hand, when she slowly reached underneath her pillow and pulled out a small envelope. She placed it in my palm and told me to open it. Inside was a simple brass key. For a second I just stared at it. I recognized the shape because I had seen that key before. It looked like the kind of key that opened the front door of her house, the place where I had spent countless weekends growing up. Along with it was a small folded note. On the paper was a phone number written in Grandma Cora's handwriting. Underneath it were a few words that immediately caught my attention. "Call her the day after." I looked at Grandma Cora, waiting for an explanation. I wanted to ask what she meant, why she was giving me the key, and why she seemed so certain that I would need that number. She just smiled gently. Then she told me something I didn't fully understand at the time. "I've handled everything. Don't fight with them at the funeral. Just let them talk. Then go home." Her words stayed with me, but I couldn't figure out what she meant. My mind was focused on the fact that I was sitting beside the person who had always been there for me, and I wasn't ready to think about life without her. I assumed the key was simply a reminder of her house. Maybe she wanted me to have something that connected me to her memories. Maybe it was her quiet way of telling me that I would always have a place that felt safe. I carefully placed the envelope inside my coat pocket and promised myself I would keep it safe. 2 days later, Grandma Cora was gone. The woman who had been my biggest supporter, my comfort during difficult moments, and the person who always made me feel understood was no longer there. At the time, I thought the hardest part would be saying goodbye. I had no idea that after the funeral, the key in my pocket would become the only thing connecting me to the truth Grandma Cora had spent months preparing. The funeral was the first time I truly felt how different everything had become. From the outside, Dale and Marlene looked like grieving family members who had everything under control. They welcomed relatives, spoke with guests, and carried themselves like they were the ones holding everyone together. But I noticed the small things. The way Marlene barely looked in my direction. The way Dale answered questions before anyone could ask me anything. It felt like they had already decided how the day would go and where I belonged in it. I tried to ignore it because I didn't want Grandma Cora's final goodbye to become another family conflict. I wanted to focus on honoring her, not fighting with people who were supposed to love me. During the service, I held onto a handwritten note I had prepared for Grandma Cora. It was something personal, something I wanted to leave with her because she had asked me during one of our last conversations to always keep our memories close. When I stepped forward, Dale stopped me. He lowered his voice and told me not to make a scene. He said I needed to stay in my lane. Those words hurt more than I expected. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But the message was clear. He was reminding me that, in his mind, I was not the person who had a say. A few relatives nearby noticed the exchange, but nobody stepped in. Everyone was uncomfortable, and I didn't want to create a bigger moment during Grandma Cora's funeral. So I stepped back. I stayed quiet. That was something Grandma Cora had taught me many times. Not every battle needed to be fought in front of everyone. Some truths revealed themselves when people were given enough time to show who they really were. After the burial, people slowly began leaving. Hugs were exchanged, cars pulled away, and the crowd disappeared until only a few memories of the day remained. I sat in my car for a while trying to process everything. The sadness of losing Grandma Cora was already heavy, but there was another feeling growing inside me. Something felt wrong. The way my parents had acted, the way they had taken control, the way they treated me like I was an outsider. So I pushed those thoughts aside. I started the car and drove toward the house where I had spent so much of my life. The house where Grandma Cora's memories lived. The house where I thought I still belonged. And inside my coat pocket, the small brass key was waiting. When I pulled into Grandma Cora's driveway, something felt different before I even stepped out of the car. At first I couldn't explain it. The house looked the same from the outside. The flowers near the walkway were still there. The curtains she had chosen years ago were still hanging in the windows. Everything looked familiar, but something about the silence around the place felt strange. I grabbed my bags from the car and walked toward the front door. For years I had used that entrance without thinking. It was the place where Grandma Cora would open the door with a smile, where the smell of her cooking would welcome me before I even stepped inside. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the brass key she had given me. I placed it into the lock and turned it. Nothing happened. I tried again, thinking maybe my hands were shaking or I wasn't lining it up correctly. Still nothing. That was when I noticed the lock looked newer. I stood there for a moment, confused. I walked around to the back entrance, hoping maybe something was wrong with the front door. But the back lock had been replaced too. My stomach sank. Then I saw them. My bags were sitting neatly on the front porch. Not left carelessly. Not thrown outside in anger. They had been packed carefully, almost like someone had planned this before I even arrived. I looked toward the driveway and saw Dale's car parked there. Before I could knock, the upstairs window opened. Marlene looked down at me. There was no sadness in her face. No concern. No question about where I would go or how I was feeling after losing Grandma Cora. She simply told me that things had changed and that the house was a family matter now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The place that held years of my memories with Grandma Cora was suddenly being treated like somewhere I had no right to enter. I asked what she meant. I asked why my belongings were outside. She didn't answer the questions I needed answered. Instead, she repeated that I needed to make other arrangements. Then the window closed. Just like that. I stood there alone on the porch, staring at the place where Grandma Cora had always made me feel welcome. A few days earlier, she had held my hand and told me not to worry. She had told me she had handled everything. At that moment, I finally understood that her words had a meaning I hadn't discovered yet. I sat down in my car holding the envelope she gave me. My hands were shaking as I looked at the handwriting on the note again. Call her the day after. The day after the funeral had arrived. And for the first time I wondered if Grandma Cora knew this exact moment would happen. I stayed in my car at the end of the driveway for a long time, just staring at the house. A few hours earlier, I had been standing beside Grandma Cora's grave, saying goodbye to the person who had always made me feel protected. Now I was sitting outside the same place she loved, being treated like I didn't belong. My mind kept replaying everything Marlene had said. The cold way she looked at me. The way she closed the window without giving me a real explanation. The way my parents had already decided my place before I even arrived. Then I remembered the envelope. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled it out carefully. Grandma Cora's handwriting was still there, written in the same careful way I had seen my entire life. Call her the day after. I looked at the note again. This was the day she meant. For some reason, that simple instruction gave me a little comfort. Grandma Cora had known something was coming. She had not left me with nothing. She had prepared something even if I didn't understand what it was yet. My fingers hesitated over the phone. I didn't know who Sandra Off was. I didn't know what she had to do with Grandma Cora. I didn't know why Grandma Cora wanted me to call instead of telling me everything herself. But I trusted her. I dialed the number. The phone barely rang before someone answered. Reeve. Hearing my name surprised me. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Sandra. Her voice was calm, steady, and completely different from the chaos I had just experienced. She told me she had been expecting my call. Those words immediately caught my attention. Expecting my call. It meant Grandma Cora had planned this moment. She had known I would need that number. She had known I would be standing there, confused and hurt, looking for answers. Sandra didn't explain much over the phone. She simply told me that Grandma Cora had left very specific instructions and asked me to meet her the following morning. She didn't sound nervous. She didn't sound surprised. She sounded like someone who was waiting for a final step to happen. After the call ended, I stayed there for a few more minutes. I didn't call Dale. I didn't argue with Marlene. I didn't ask relatives to take my side. Something inside me told me to follow Grandma Cora's plan exactly. That night, I stayed at a friend's place with only the bags my parents left outside and the envelope Grandma Cora had given me. I barely slept. Because for the first time since she passed away, I started wondering if losing my home was only the beginning of what Grandma Cora had prepared. The next morning, I walked into Sandra Off's office still carrying the same confusion I had been feeling since the funeral. I didn't know what I was about to hear. Part of me expected a simple explanation, maybe something about Grandma Cora's belongings or a personal message she wanted me to receive. But the moment Sandra placed the first document in front of me, I realized this was much bigger than I imagined. She calmly explained that Grandma Cora had been planning everything for months. She showed me the updated will, the official paperwork, and the documents that had been prepared long before her final days. Then she said something that completely changed how I saw everything. The house wasn't waiting to be passed down. It was already mine. I just sat there silently trying to process those words. The home where I had been locked out the day before had already been legally transferred into my name. The key Grandma Cora gave me wasn't just a memory. It was connected to something real, something she had carefully arranged before anyone knew. Sandra explained that Grandma Cora had handled every detail properly. She had chosen her own attorney, reviewed every decision, and made sure everything was recorded exactly the way she wanted. There were no mistakes. No missing paperwork. No confusion. Everything had been completed months earlier. I looked down at the documents and felt a wave of emotions hit me all at once. I wasn't crying because of the house. I was crying because I finally understood Grandma Cora's last words. I've handled everything. She knew I would be hurt. She knew I would feel abandoned. She knew there might be a moment when I questioned whether I mattered to my own family. But she had prepared something that answered that question without needing an argument. Sandra then handed me a sealed letter. She explained that Grandma Cora had written it herself and wanted it kept safe until the right time. It wasn't just a legal document. It was her own voice, her own explanation, and her own way of speaking after she was gone. I held that envelope carefully. For months, my parents had believed they were in control. They thought the house was already decided. They thought removing me from the picture would be simple. But Grandma Cora had been quietly making choices while everyone else was making assumptions. She never wanted a fight. She never wanted revenge. She simply wanted the truth to come out when it mattered most. And sitting there in Sandra's office, I finally understood that Grandma Cora had not left me behind. She had been protecting me all along. Sandra didn't tell me to call my parents. She didn't tell me to confront them or demand an apology. Instead, she did exactly what Grandma Cora had wanted from the beginning. She let the documents speak. Within 2 days, Sandra prepared and sent a formal notice to Dale and Marlene. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't filled with accusations. It was simply a clear explanation of the legal decisions Grandma Cora had made and the rights that had already been transferred. That was the moment everything changed. My phone started ringing. Dale called once. Then again. Then again. I watched his name appear on my screen, but I didn't answer. For so long I had tried to explain myself to my parents. I had tried to make them understand my choices, my feelings, and the way their actions affected me. But this time there was nothing I needed to prove. The truth was already written down. Later that day, Marlene reached out through my Aunt Bet. She wanted to meet and talk things through. I knew what that meant. They wanted a conversation where they could explain, question, and possibly change what had already been decided. I agreed to one meeting. Not at the house. Not behind closed doors. I met them in a public place and Sandra came with me. When Dale and Marlene arrived, they looked confident. They seemed to believe this was still a situation they could control. They probably expected me to be upset, emotional, or willing to compromise. But I wasn't there to argue. Sandra placed the documents in front of them one by one. She explained the dates, the signatures, the legal process, everything Grandma Cora had completed months before. The house, the accounts she had prepared, the personal items she had already assigned. Every detail had been handled carefully. I watched my parents' expressions change as they realized this wasn't something that could be undone. Grandma Cora had not made a last-minute decision. She had thought about it, planned it, and completed every step while they believed the future belonged to them. Dale looked at the paperwork quietly. For the first time he seemed to understand that Grandma Cora had seen everything clearly. She had seen who was there for her. She had seen who cared. And she had made her choice based on that. There was no shouting. No dramatic scene. Just the quiet realization that Grandma Cora had been prepared long before anyone else knew there was something to prepare for. Moving back into Grandma Cora's house didn't feel like winning. It felt like coming home to a place that had been waiting for me. On Saturday morning I carried my bags through the front door. The same bags my parents had left sitting on the porch days earlier. I didn't bring much with me. Just my clothes, a few personal things, and one photograph of Grandma Cora and me from years ago. I stood in the entryway for a while, taking everything in. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. Every corner carried a memory. The kitchen where she taught me her recipes. The chair where she spent her evenings reading. The small details that made the house feel like her were still there. I walked into her room and sat in her favorite chair. For the first time in days I felt calm. Then I took out the letter Sandra had given me. The sealed letter Grandma Cora had written with her own hands. I opened it slowly, almost afraid to read it because I knew this was the last message she had left for me. Her words were exactly what I needed. She wrote that she had noticed everything long before I did. She knew the tension in the family. She knew there were people who valued control more than connection. But she also wrote that she never wanted her final months filled with arguments. She didn't want to spend her remaining time fighting. She wanted peace. Grandma Cora explained that her decision was never about punishing anyone. It was about recognizing the person who stayed when things became difficult. The person who showed up without expecting anything in return. She wrote about the hospital visits, the conversations, the quiet moments that mattered more than anyone realized. Then I reached the final part of the letter. One sentence stopped me completely. You were always the one who stayed. The house should belong to the one who stayed. I read it several times. For so long I wondered whether my place in the family mattered. I wondered why my parents pushed me away and why they treated me like I was easy to replace. But Grandma Cora had seen me. She had noticed every moment I thought nobody noticed. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Then I walked to her room, lifted the pillow where she had kept so many important things, and placed the letter underneath it. Right where she had hidden the key. The same key that started this entire journey. Grandma Cora was gone, but her final gift wasn't just a house. It was the reminder that love is shown through actions, and the people who truly care are often the ones who quietly stay. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who believes actions speak louder than words, and subscribe for more unforgettable family stories. I'll see you in the next one.